I'm Joshua, I'm 28 years old, and at my own family's Thanksgiving dinner, my mother handed out expensive gifts to every single person at the table except me, then told me to be grateful I was even allowed a seat. Before I tell you about the absolute legal and financial nightmare I unleashed on them exactly 1 week later, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I always wonder how far stories like this travel. The sound of my mother's knuckles slamming against my front door is something I will never forget. It was exactly 7 days after Thanksgiving. The wood of the door actually rattled in its frame. It wasn't a polite knock. It was a demand. I stood in the narrow entryway of my townhouse, looking through the peephole. My mother, Margaret, was front and center, her expensive camel coat pulled tight against the December chill. Behind her stood my father, David, holding a heavy cardboard banker's box. Next to him was my older brother, Matthew, looking pale and annoyed. And hovering in the back, jaw set in a hard, angry line, was my Uncle Joseph. "Joshua, open the door right now. We need to talk," my mother screamed. Her voice was muffled by the heavy wood, but the sheer panic in it was unmistakable. I didn't open it immediately. I just stood there, my hand resting casually on the deadbolt, feeling a strange, absolute calm wash over me. For my entire life, my stomach would have been in knots. I would have swung that door open, apologizing for whatever I had supposedly done wrong, ready to fix their mess, ready to work for free, ready to be the dependable, invisible workhorse of the family. Not today. Today, I knew exactly why they had driven 2 hours from their pristine suburban neighborhood to my place in the city. They weren't here to apologize for Thanksgiving. They were here because their entire public image, their precious charity foundation, and their financial secrets were burning to the ground, and they had just realized I was the one holding the match. To understand why I kept that door locked, you have to understand what happened at that dining room table 7 days earlier. Thanksgiving at my parents' house was always less of a family holiday and more of a theatrical production. My mother treated the dining room like a stage. The crystal was polished, the centerpieces were towering arrangements of autumn flowers, and the guest list was carefully curated to include not just family, but a few wealthy neighbors and local business owners. It was all about appearances. Dinner had finished, and the plates were being cleared. My mother stood up at the head of the table, holding a stack of beautifully wrapped boxes. I sat near the end of the table, nursing a glass of water, waiting. I had spent the last 3 weeks sleeping 4 hours a night, redesigning the entire lighting and website infrastructure for the family's annual winter charity gala. All for zero salary, as usual. I figured maybe, just maybe, I would get a token of appreciation. A card. A cheap bottle of wine. Anything. My mother walked right past my chair. The fabric of her dress brushed my shoulder. She reached for the gravy boat in the center of the table, completely ignoring me. The table went quiet. People noticed. You could hear the sudden shift in the air, the uncomfortable shuffling of chairs. Even Matthew looked up from his new cufflinks. Cleared my throat. "Mom!" She turned, holding the gravy boat, and looked down at me. Her expression didn't shift. There was no realization of a mistake. She just shrugged, a tight, patronizing smile on her face. "Oh, please, Joshua. Be grateful you can sit here." The silence stretched for a split second before my Uncle Joseph leaned back in his chair, swirling his bourbon. He let out a loud, mocking chuckle. "Yeah, kid. Be glad we still remember your name." And then the room broke open. People laughed. Actual, audible laughter from my own blood relatives and their guests. Someone down the table slapped the wood in amusement. My father just looked down at his plate, stirring his mashed potatoes, choosing silence like he always did. I didn't yell. I didn't flip the table. I didn't storm out in tears. I carefully picked up my linen napkin, folded it perfectly into a square, set it next to my plate, and looked right into my mother's eyes. "Oh," I said, my voice completely steady. "Good to know." I stood up, grabbed my coat from the hallway, and walked out the front door. Nobody followed me. Nobody called my phone. As I drove the 2 hours back to my house in the dark, the radio turned off, The silence in the car was deafening. But for the first time in 28 years, my vision was crystal clear. I finally understood the rules of the game they had been playing my whole life. And I decided right then and there that I was done playing. The next morning, I woke up early. I made a pot of black coffee and sat at my kitchen island, staring at the wall. The humiliation from the night before was still burning in my chest, but it was mixing with something else. A deep, heavy realization. This wasn't an isolated incident. The Thanksgiving dinner was just the loudest version of a quiet reality I had lived with for nearly 3 decades. In my family, there were 2 roles. You were either the showcase or you were the staff. My older brother, Matthew, was the showcase. Matthew was the golden child. When Matthew graduated high school, my parents liquidated a massive college fund to send him to a private university out of state, paying for his tuition, his rent, his car. When I graduated 2 years later, I was handed a brochure for the local community college and told I needed to take out loans because the family finances were tied up. When Matthew got a mid-level promotion at a logistics firm, a job my Uncle Joseph helped him secure, my parents threw a catered party in the backyard. When I launched my own architectural lighting design company from scratch and landed my first 6-figure commercial contract, my mother's only comment was asking if I could use my new vendor discounts to get her cheaper string lights for the patio. I was the staff. I was useful. Every single year, my mother and Uncle Joseph ran the Mercer Bennett Holiday Gala, a massive, high-society charity event that funded a local scholarship. It was the crown jewel of my mother's social life. It made them look like saints. But behind the scenes, I built the whole thing. I coded the donor website. I managed the payment gateways. I designed the promotional materials. I spent days up on ladders in the freezing cold setting up complex lighting rigs for the venue. I handled the vendor contracts. I did all of this for free because that's what you do for family, right? You help out. You contribute. I took a sip of my coffee and opened my laptop. I logged on to Facebook. Right at the top of my feed was a post from my mother. It was a picture of the Thanksgiving table. The caption read, "My heart is so full. Nothing matters more than having my beautiful family home for the holidays. So blessed." I clicked on the photo. It was a beautiful shot. The turkey looked perfect. Everyone was smiling. But as my eyes scanned the edge of the frame, my stomach dropped. I wasn't in it. I hadn't just been left out of the picture. I had been intentionally cropped out. I could see a sliver of the sleeve of my sweater on the far left edge. She had specifically edited the photo to remove me from the table before posting it to her hundreds of friends. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I kept scrolling. 2 posts down, there was a video shared by my cousin Luke. The caption was a string of laughing emojis. I hit play. The video was shaky, taken from under the table, but the audio was crystal clear. It was the exact moment from last night. My mother's voice, "Be grateful you can sit here." Uncle Joseph's voice, "Be glad we still remember your name." The roar of laughter. And then my own quiet voice, "Good to know." Luke had posted my public humiliation for his entire friends list to see. And my mother had liked the video. I closed the laptop so hard the screen snapped against the keyboard. The air in my kitchen suddenly felt too thin to breathe. It wasn't just that they didn't value me. It was that they actively enjoyed putting me in my place. They loved the power dynamic. They loved knowing that no matter how hard they kicked me, I would always crawl back to fix their website, wire their lights, and make them look good to the town. I picked up my phone and called my best friend, Gabriel. Gabriel works as a forensic accountant for the city. He's a guy who looks at numbers and sees the truth. He's also the only person who has ever straight up told me my family was toxic. He answered on the second ring. "Hey man, how was the turkey?" I didn't say hello. I just started talking. I told him everything. The gifts, the comment, the laughter, the cropped photo, the video. I paced back and forth across my hardwood floors, my voice cracking, finally letting out the anger I had been swallowing for 28 years. Gabriel listened in complete silence until I was finished. Then he let out a long, heavy breath. "Joshua," Gabriel said, his voice dead serious, Listen to me very carefully. They don't panic when they hurt you. They only panic when they lose access to you. You are nothing but an asset to them. A free employee. An ATM for labor. You want to see how much they really love you? Turn off the machine. I stopped pacing. What do you mean? The charity event, Gabriel said. Who owns the domain name for the donor site? I do, I said. I registered it under my company's LLC. Who is the authorized signatory on the vendor contracts for the lighting, the staging, and the catering? Me. My name is on the master agreements. Who manages the payment processing gateway that collects the ticket sales? My business account. I route the funds to their charity account once a week. Gabriel let out a sharp, dark laugh. Joshua, you hold the keys to their entire kingdom. Cut them off. Withdraw your services. Legally, cleanly, and permanently. Let them see what it costs to treat you like garbage. I stared out my kitchen window at the gray morning sky. A strange, terrifying thrill ran through my veins. He was right. I had built their empire and I could take my bricks back. Gabriel, I said quietly, are you free to come over? I need help drafting an email. I'm grabbing my laptop and bringing donuts. Give me 20 minutes, he said. That was the moment the scared, desperate to be loved son died, and the man who knew his own worth woke up. I had no idea how massive the explosion was going to be, or the dark secrets I was about to uncover. I just knew I was about to strike a match. Gabriel arrived with a box of black coffee and half a dozen glazed donuts. We didn't waste time on small talk. We sat at my dining table, opened our laptops, and started dismantling my involvement in the Mercer Bennett Holiday Gala piece by piece. I drafted a formal, ice-cold email. There was no emotion in it. No mention of Thanksgiving, no mention of the video, no family drama. Just pure, undeniable business. To Margaret Bennett, Joseph Mercer, and the Charity Board of Directors. Subject: immediate withdrawal of services and assets. Effective immediately, I am withdrawing all professional services, technical support, and vendor management for the upcoming holiday gala. Furthermore, all digital assets registered under my LLC, including the primary donor website domain, the payment processing gateway, and all proprietary lighting design schematics, are hereby revoked from your use. You no longer have authorization to use my name, my company's credit line, or my vendor relationships. Please find alternate arrangements for the remainder of the event planning. All current vendor contracts bearing my signature will be paused pending reassignment to an authorized member of your committee. Do not contact me regarding this transition. You may direct legal inquiries to my attorney. I didn't actually have a lawyer on retainer for this, but throwing the word in there was Gabriel's idea. It puts a wall up, he said, chewing on a donut. It tells them they can't just bully you into fixing it. I took a deep breath, hovered my mouse over the send button, and clicked it. I CC'd the entire board of directors, the venue manager, and the top 3 local sponsors. Now, Gabriel said, leaning back and cracking his knuckles. We wait. We didn't have to wait long. Exactly 14 minutes after I sent the email, my phone vibrated on the table. It was my mother. I watched her name flash on the screen, feeling a familiar spike of anxiety, but I didn't reach for it. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. My brother, Matthew. Ignored. Then, a text from my father. Joshua, what is this email? Your mother is in tears. Call us immediately. Stop acting like a child. Look at that. Gabriel pointed at the screen. Not are you okay? Not we're sorry. Just stop acting like a child and fix your mother's problem. I picked up the phone and blocked all 3 of their numbers. Then I blocked Uncle Joseph. I blocked my cousin Luke. I shut the iron gates. By noon, the professional fallout began to hit. The first email I got was from Elijah, the owner of the largest floral and staging company in the county. He was providing $30,000 worth of centerpieces and drapery for the gala. Joshua, Elijah wrote, just saw your email. If you're off the project, I need a new signatory on the liability waiver by 5 p.m. today, or I'm pulling my crew. I trust you, but I don't know the rest of your committee well enough to float this kind of inventory without your guarantee. I replied simply, I understand, Elijah. You have to protect your business. Please reach out to Margaret directly. 10 minutes later, the venue manager emailed to say they were locking the loading dock until the insurance certificates, which were under my name, were updated with a new underwriter. The gala was less than 3 weeks away. The entire logistical skeleton of the event was collapsing in real time. Without me, they had a ballroom, a guest list, and zero way to actually execute the night. The payment gateway on the website went dark, meaning they couldn't process ticket sales or accept online donations. I felt a sudden, sharp pang of guilt. This was a charity, after all. Gabriel, I muttered, rubbing my eyes. Is this too far? There's scholarship money tied to this. Gabriel stopped typing on his laptop and looked at me. Joshua, the charity will survive. Someone else will step up. You are not responsible for carrying the moral weight of your parents' vanity project. But more importantly, he turned his laptop screen toward me. I don't think this is just about vanity. I think we have a massive problem. I frowned, leaning in to look at his screen. What is that? Since I'm here, I decided to do a quick reconciliation of the payment gateway logs before you permanently shut it down, Gabriel said, his voice dropping an octave. You've been routing the gross ticket sales directly to the charity's main operating account, right? And Uncle Joseph manages the expense disbursements. Yeah. He approves the vendor invoices and writes the checks from the charity account. Okay, Gabriel said, pointing to a spreadsheet he had generated. I cross-referenced the vendor invoices you have saved in your cloud drive with the expense withdrawals Joseph has been logging in the shared admin portal. He highlighted 3 rows in bright yellow. Look at this. Joseph logged a payment of $8,500 for premium staging equipment last month. But the invoice you have from the staging company is only for $4,000. Where did the other $4,500 go? My stomach turned to ice. Maybe it's a typo? Once is a typo, Gabriel said grimly. I found 5 of these discrepancies. Inflated invoice logs. The money is being withdrawn from the charity account, but it's not going to the vendors. And look at this. He clicked to another tab. This is a ledger of donor hospitality. Expenses approved by your mother. I stared at the screen. There were charges for a luxury spa resort 3 towns over. Charges for high-end boutique clothing stores. A $2,000 charge at a Michelin star restaurant. She told me those were dinners to court high-net-worth donors. I whispered, feeling the blood drain from my face. Did the donors get massages and Prada bags too? Gabriel asked softly. My mother and my uncle weren't just using me for free labor. They were actively siphoning money from a scholarship charity to fund their lifestyle, and they were using my clean, perfectly organized website and vendor system as the front to make it look legitimate. If the IRS or a state auditor ever came knocking, my name was all over the foundational paperwork. The humiliation of Thanksgiving was instantly replaced by a blinding, white-hot rage. I wasn't just the unloved son. I was the patsy. Gabriel, I said, my voice shaking with fury. Print everything. Every single receipt. Every log. Every email. What are you going to do? He asked, already hitting the print command. I'm going to burn it to the ground, I said. The next 3 days were a masterclass in psychological warfare, and I was holding the high ground. My family realized quickly that their phone calls weren't getting through. The digital wall I had built around myself was impenetrable. So they changed tactics. They started using flying monkeys. On Tuesday, I received an email from an aunt who hadn't spoken to me in 4 years, telling me I was breaking my mother's heart and needed to apologize for my tantrum. On Wednesday, a family friend left a voicemail on my business line, heavily implying that my reputation in the city would be ruined if I abandoned a charity event right before Christmas. I didn't engage. I didn't defend myself. I let them talk to the void. Meanwhile, inside my apartment, Gabriel and I were building an airtight case. We spent hours organizing the printed documents into a thick binder. every inflated invoice from Uncle Joseph, every fraudulent hospitality charge from my mother. And then, I found the final nail in the coffin. I was digging through an old shared drive looking for a specific contract when I stumbled across a folder labeled Joseph, Pitch Deck, 2024. I opened it. It was a presentation Uncle Joseph had given to a group of corporate sponsors to secure a massive $50,000 grant for the gala. Slide 4 was titled, Our Visionary Design. I clicked on it and felt the breath leave my lungs. It was my rendering. A complex, highly technical 3D architectural lighting schematic I had designed specifically for the venue's vaulted ceilings. It had taken me 60 hours to build. I had showed it to my mother months ago. Right below my design, in bold letters, it said, Conceptualized and engineered by Joseph Mercer. He had stolen my work. He had presented my intellectual property to corporate sponsors to secure funding, claiming he was the genius behind it. And in the speaker notes section at the bottom of the slide, there was a typed memo from my mother to Joseph. Make sure not to bring up Joshua's involvement during the pitch. The board likes seeing the senior family members leading the creative. They hadn't just forgotten me at Thanksgiving. They had methodically erased me. They stole my talent, slapped their names on it, and then laughed in my face when I expected a basic thank you gift. I remembered the time Uncle Joseph went through his bitter divorce a few years ago. He had complained loudly at every family gathering that his ex-wife had taken him to the cleaners, that he was strapped for cash, that he deserved better. I guess stealing from a charity and stealing his nephew's work was his way of making himself whole. I grabbed my phone and found the number for Christopher, the chairman of the charity's board of directors. Christopher was a retired judge. He was old money, strict, and incredibly protective of the foundation's reputation. He was the one person my mother and uncle actually feared. I dialed the number. He picked up on the third ring. Joshua, Christopher said, his voice grave. I'm glad you called. The committee is in chaos. Your mother tells me you're having a mental health crisis and needed to step away abruptly. What is going on? A mental health crisis. Of course, that was her spin. She was telling the board I was crazy to cover her tracks. I gripped the edge of my kitchen counter so hard my knuckles turned white. Christopher, I am perfectly sane. I stepped away because I uncovered severe financial and ethical irregularities in the gala's management. As the person whose name is on the vendor contracts, I had to immediately protect myself from liability. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. The kind of silence that happens right before an earthquake. Irregularities, Christopher repeated. It wasn't a question. Yes, I said. Inflated vendor invoices, charity funds being used for personal luxury expenses, and the theft of my intellectual property to secure corporate sponsorships. Do you have proof, Joshua? These are massive allegations against your own family. I have a binder full of it, I said smoothly. Digital logs, receipts, internal memos. I am scanning it right now. I will email you the encrypted file in 10 minutes. I strongly advise you to hire an independent forensic auditor before another dollar moves through that account. Send it, Christopher said, his voice suddenly sounding very cold and very professional. If what you say is true, Joshua, I am very sorry. Don't be sorry for me, Christopher. I'm finally out. I hung up the phone. I scanned the documents, attached them to a secure email, and sent them to Christopher. The deed was done. The missile had left the silo. There was no stopping it now. I spent the rest of Thursday and Friday catching up on my actual paying clients. I felt a strange sense of peace. The anxiety that had plagued me my whole life was completely gone. I had cut out the rot. But I knew my family. I knew they wouldn't just accept defeat. When manipulators lose control of the narrative, they escalate. They show up in person. They try to use physical presence and intimidation to force you back into submission. So, when Saturday afternoon rolled around, and the aggressive, rattling knock shook my front door, I wasn't surprised. I didn't panic. I knew exactly who it was, and I knew exactly what they wanted. I looked through the peephole, saw the four of them standing on my porch like an angry mob, and took a deep breath. It was time for the final act. "Joshua, open the door right now. We need to talk." My mother screamed again. I unlatched the deadbolt and pulled the door open, leaving the chain engaged. I looked at the four of them through the 6-inch gap. The cold December air blew into the hallway, carrying the scent of my mother's expensive perfume. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice flat. My mother's face immediately shifted. The anger vanished, replaced by a mask of desperate, maternal concern. "Oh, sweetheart, please take the chain off. We're freezing out here. We just want to talk. This whole thing has gotten completely out of hand." "Talk about what?" "Thanksgiving," I asked. Uncle Joseph pushed his way to the front, leaning close to the gap in the door. "Cut the crap, Joshua. You're throwing a tantrum over a joke, and you're ruining a charity event. People are asking questions. You're embarrassing the family." "I'm embarrassing the family?" I raised an eyebrow. "Interesting." My father held up the heavy banker's box. He looked exhausted, the bags under his eyes dark and heavy. "Josh, please." Elijah pulled his floral crew. "The venue is threatening to cancel our date. We just need you to sign these transition forms and authorize the vendor payments. It's an administrative mess. We can deal with the family stuff later, but you can't punish the scholarship fund. Fix the public mess first, feel your feelings later." That was my father's motto. I unhooked the chain and swung the door wide open. I didn't step back to invite them into the living room. I stood squarely in the entryway, blocking their path. "Put the box down, Dad," I said. He looked confused but set the heavy box on the small console table in the hall. My mother tried to step past me, reaching out to touch my arm. "Joshua, if you just sign the papers, we can get everything back on track. We'll even buy you a nice Christmas gift to make up for last week. Okay?" I pulled my arm back, stepping out of her reach. My jaw tightened, a hard knot forming in my cheek. "You're offering to buy my compliance with a Christmas gift? After you stole my designs, Uncle Joseph?" The hallway went dead silent. Uncle Joseph's face turned a mottled, ugly shade of red. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. My brother Matthew, who had been silent up until now, frowned. "What are you talking about, Josh? Stole designs. Stay out of this, Matthew," Joseph snapped, finding his voice. He turned to me, his eyes narrowing. "You're delusional." I conceptualized that lighting rig. "You just drafted it. You presented my work to corporate sponsors and specifically told them not to mention my name," I said, my voice rising, ringing off the walls of the narrow hallway. "And you, Mom, the spa weekends? The Michelin star dinners? Using donor hospitality funds to pay for your luxury lifestyle while I was up on ladders at 2 a.m. working for free." My mother physically recoiled, her hand flying to her chest. "How dare you?" she gasped, her voice trembling with manufactured outrage. "Those were legitimate networking expenses. You don't know the first thing about running a foundation. You're just a bitter, jealous boy because Matthew got a promotion and you're still playing with wires." There it was, the real Margaret, the venom she usually kept hidden behind a polite smile. My father looked nervously between us. "Joshua, listen, there were some accounting errors. Joseph made some mistakes with the invoices. We're sorting it out. But if you don't sign these papers today, the vendors won't work, and the gala is canceled. Do you really want to be the reason those kids don't get their college scholarships?" He was trying to weaponize my guilt. It was a classic move. I looked at the banker's box. I knew exactly what was inside. Backdated invoices, cleaned up ledgers, a non-disclosure agreement disguised as a transition document. They wanted me to sign off on their mess, effectively making me legally complicit in their fraud, so they could sweep it under the rug and save their reputations. I looked up at my father, then at my mother, and finally at Uncle Joseph. I felt a smile touch the corners of my mouth. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who held all the cards. "I'm not signing anything in that box," I said slowly, clearly emphasizing every word. "Joshua, goddamn it!" Uncle Joseph exploded, stepping toward me aggressively. "You will sign those papers, or I swear to God I will ruin your little business. I know people in this town." "You don't have to ruin anything, Joseph," I replied, my voice dropping to a deadly calm. "Because you're already ruined." The confusion on their faces was palpable. My mother blinked rapidly. "What are you talking about?" I crossed my arms over my chest. "You think you came here to bully me into fixing an administrative error. But you're too late." On Thursday afternoon, I sent a fully encrypted file containing every fraudulent invoice, every personal spa charge, and the internal memos regarding my stolen designs. My mother's face went chalk white. "Sent it to who?" she whispered. "To Christopher," I said, "and the entire board of directors." It was as if I had detonated a bomb in my own hallway. The air was sucked out of the room. My father physically stumbled backward, hitting his shoulder against the wall. Uncle Joseph's mouth fell open, his eyes wide with a terror I had never seen in him before. "You didn't?" my mother breathed, shaking her head in denial. "You couldn't have. Christopher. Christopher will involve the authorities." "I know," I said. "He already hired an independent forensic accountant. They started auditing the charity's main operating account yesterday morning. Your accounts are frozen. That's why the vendors are calling you, Dad. It's not because I won't sign. It's because the board cut off your access to the money. Here is the turning point, the exact moment I took back control of my life. Thank you so much for sticking with me this far. You guys are amazing. Please do me a huge favor. Hit the like button and comment the number 1 down below so I know you're still here with me. It helps this video reach more people, and honestly, it just means the world to know my story is resonating with someone out there. Your support gives me the push to share the rest of this crazy journey. I watched my family shatter in real time. The arrogant, untouchable facade they had worn my entire life dissolved into absolute panic. "You little bastard," Uncle Joseph hissed, stepping toward me, his fists clenched. "You just destroyed this family." I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I looked the man who had mocked me at Thanksgiving right in the eye. "No, Joseph," I said softly. "I just turned on the lights." The aftermath of my revelation was pure chaos, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one caught in the tornado. I was watching it from a safe distance. Uncle Joseph was breathing heavily, his face purple with rage. For a second, I thought he might actually swing at me, but then Matthew stepped between us. Matthew, the golden child, the brother who had spent his life coasting on my parents' favor, ignoring my existence unless he needed tech support. He looked completely shell-shocked. He turned to our mother, his voice cracking. "Mom, is it true? Did you and Uncle Joseph steal from the scholarship fund?" My mother burst into tears, real ugly, panicked tears, not the delicate, dramatic crying she usually used to get her way. This was the raw terror of a woman realizing her entire social standing was evaporating. "We didn't steal. It was just, we borrowed it for networking. Joshua is twisting everything to make us look bad because he's bitter." "Stop lying, Margaret." My father suddenly barked. His voice was loud and harsh, a sound I had rarely heard from him. He looked at me, his eyes full of a pathetic kind of sorrow. "Joshua, Christopher called me this morning. He told me he was stepping down as chairman and handing the books over to the state attorney's office if we didn't cooperate with the audit. I didn't know you were the one who gave him the records. I thought we could just fix it quietly today." "You can't fix a felony quietly, Dad," I said, my voice empty of any sympathy. "You chose to protect her image over doing the right thing. You chose to let them use me. You're just as guilty." I reached out, grabbed the heavy banker's box off the console table, and shoved it hard into my father's chest. He stumbled back, clutching it awkwardly. "Take your garbage and get out of my house," I ordered, pointing to the door. "Joshua, please, where are we supposed to go? What are we supposed to do?" My mother sobbed, reaching for my hand. I pulled away in disgust. "You don't get to call it love when what you really mean is access. You wanted me to be grateful for a seat at your table? Well, the table is gone." Get out. Uncle Joseph spat a curse at me, turned on his heel, and stormed out to his car. My father, looking broken and 10 years older, gently took my mother's arm and led her out the door. She was wailing now, a high, piercing sound of absolute defeat. Matthew lingered for a moment. He looked at me, really looked at me, as if seeing me for the very first time. He opened his mouth to say something, then closed it, shook his head, and walked out into the cold. I shut the door. I threw the deadbolt. I slid the chain into place. I leaned my back against the wood and slid down to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. I sat there in the quiet hallway of my townhouse for a long time. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the massive, overwhelming rush of adrenaline leaving my body. It was over. The suffocating weight I had carried since childhood was finally lifted. The fallout in the following weeks was swift and brutal. As I had predicted, Christopher didn't mess around. By Monday morning, he officially suspended the Mercer Bennett Holiday Gala. The email he sent to the sponsors, vendors, and ticket holders was a masterpiece of polite corporate destruction. He stated that the event was postponed indefinitely pending a comprehensive restructuring of financial oversight. In our wealthy, gossipy suburban town, financial oversight translated immediately to scandal. The rumor mill exploded. My Aunt Sarah called me, not to demand an apology this time, but to whisper furiously about how my mother had been banned from the local country club because 2 of the board members were massive donors to the charity. I learned from Gabriel, whose accounting firm occasionally consulted with the state, that Uncle Joseph was forced into a brutal settlement. To avoid criminal embezzlement charges, he had to liquidate his retirement accounts and sell his boat to repay the charity in full plus penalties. He was ousted from the board in disgrace. My mother was forced to publicly resign as the face of the foundation she had spent 20 years building. The humiliation of Thanksgiving was nothing compared to the humiliation of not being able to show her face at the grocery store without people whispering behind her back. As for me, I blocked the noise. I didn't gloat. I didn't post vague, passive-aggressive quotes on Facebook. I just lived my life. With the massive block of free time I suddenly had, I threw myself into my business. Without the dark cloud of my family constantly demanding my energy, my creativity exploded. I submitted proposals for 3 major commercial contracts I never would have had the time for before. But the most surprising fallout wasn't the financial ruin of my abusers. It was the unexpected phone call I received 2 weeks before Christmas. It was a brisk Tuesday afternoon, and I was in my studio reviewing CAD drawings. My phone rang. It was an unknown number, but it was from a local area code. I answered cautiously. "Hello, Josh." The voice was quiet, hesitant. It was Matthew, my brother, the golden child. I stiffened. "What do you want, Matthew? If Mom put you up to this—" No, he interrupted quickly. "Mom doesn't know I'm calling. Neither does Dad. It's really bad at the house right now, Josh. Mom won't get out of bed, and Dad is just drinking in the garage." "Sounds like the consequences of their own actions," I replied coldly. "I'm busy, Matt." "Wait, please don't hang up," he pleaded. I could hear the genuine desperation in his voice. "I don't want anything from you. I don't want you to fix it. Can I buy you a coffee? Please, just half an hour." I stared at the blinking cursor on my computer screen. The old Joshua would have said yes immediately, desperate for any scrap of brotherly connection. The new Joshua wanted to tell him to go to hell, but I heard a crack in his armor. For the first time, he didn't sound like the arrogant golden boy. He sounded lost. "Half an hour," I said. "There's a diner 2 blocks from my place. I'll meet you there at 3. I didn't know what to expect from that meeting, but I knew one thing for sure. The dynamic had permanently shifted. I was no longer the punching bag. I was the one holding the boundaries. And as I grabbed my coat to head out into the cold winter air, I realized something profound. Losing my toxic family was the greatest gift I had ever received. The silence in my house after I threw that deadbolt and locked my family out was heavy, but it wasn't lonely. It was the sound of absolute, unconditional peace. But the peace inside my walls was a sharp, dramatic contrast to the absolute hurricane ripping through my family's lives in the wealthy suburbs over the next few weeks. When you build your entire life on a foundation of lies, fake appearances, and someone else's unpaid labor, the collapse isn't just loud. It is total. Gabriel came over a few days later with a six-pack of beer and a stack of printed updates. Because his forensic accounting firm occasionally consulted with the state agencies, he had a front-row seat to the financial bloodbath my Uncle Joseph was currently drowning in. We sat on my living room rug, clinking our bottles together. "It is a massacre, Joshua," Gabriel said, shaking his head, though there was a distinct smirk on his face. Christopher did not mess around. The charity board handed all the financial logs over to the state attorney's office. Joseph hired a high-priced defense lawyer to try and keep himself out of prison. But the paper trail you saved is airtight. He is being charged with felony embezzlement. I took a sip of my beer, feeling the cold liquid wash down my throat. Does he have the money to pay it back? He has to liquidate everything, Gabriel explained, pulling out a sheet of paper. His retirement accounts, his stock portfolio. He lost his salary because the logistics firm he worked for fired him the second the investigation became public. They didn't want the PR nightmare. And it gets worse for him. His wife filed for divorce yesterday morning. She is demanding full custody of their 2 teenage daughters. And honestly, with a pending felony on his record, no judge in the state is going to give him shared custody. He is losing his family, his money, and his freedom. I stared at the coffee table. Uncle Joseph, the man who had laughed in my face at Thanksgiving and told me to be glad they remembered my name, was now losing everything that had his name on it. It wasn't just karma. It was consequence. What about my mother? I asked quietly. Gabriel sighed. She isn't facing criminal charges because Joseph technically forged the final signatures. But her social life is effectively undergoing a funeral. The board voted unanimously to oust her. She has been permanently banned from the country club. Nobody in her wealthy little circle will return her phone calls. The charity she used to boost her ego is now completely out of her hands. A few days after that conversation with Gabriel, my phone rang. I had unblocked my father's number just in case there was a legitimate legal emergency regarding the transition of the charity's assets. I saw his name on the screen and answered. Joshua. My father's voice came through the speaker. He sounded frail. He sounded like an old man who had finally been defeated by his own cowardice. What is it, Dad? I asked, my voice flat. I wanted to see how you were doing, he stammered. The house is unbearable right now. Your mother won't get out of bed. The community is treating us like pariahs. I had to go to the grocery store 2 towns over just to avoid people staring at me. Sounds inconvenient, I said. Is there a reason you are calling? He let out a long, shaky breath. I should have stopped her, Joshua. I should have stopped Joseph. I saw what they were doing to you with that event, all the free work they demanded. I knew it wasn't right. But your mother, you know how she gets. It was just easier to keep the peace. Easier for you, I corrected him sharply. You bought your peace by selling me out. You watched them humiliate me at Thanksgiving and you stared at your mashed potatoes. You brought a box of fraudulent papers to my house and tried to guilt-trip me into committing a crime to save her reputation. You don't get to play the victim now, Dad. I know, he whispered. I know. I hung up the phone. Apologies that only arrive after the public collapse of a lie are not worthless, but they are not enough to rebuild a bridge. The most shocking development, however, came exactly 2 weeks before Christmas. It was a freezing Tuesday afternoon. The sky was the color of wet concrete. I was sitting at my drafting table, working on a new lighting schematic for a local restaurant, when my cell phone vibrated. It was an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Josh. The voice was quiet, hesitant, almost unrecognizable. It was Matthew, my older brother, the golden child, the one who received the velvet jewelry box while I got ignored. My spine stiffened. What do you want, Matthew? If Mom put you up to this, you can save your breath. I'm not fixing her mess. No. Matthew interrupted quickly. The panic in his voice was real. Mom doesn't know I'm calling you. Neither does Dad. They are barely speaking to each other. Josh, please don't hang up. I don't want anything from you. I need to talk to you. Can I buy you a cup of coffee? Just 30 minutes. Please. I stared at the blinking cursor on my computer screen. The old Joshua would have said yes immediately, desperate for any scrap of brotherly connection, eager to please the family's favorite son. The new Joshua wanted to tell him to go to hell and block the number. But there was a crack in his armor. For the first time in his entire life, Matthew didn't sound like the arrogant, untouchable golden boy. He sounded completely lost. 30 minutes, I said. There is a diner 2 blocks from my place. I will meet you there at 3 o'clock. I arrived at the diner 10 minutes early. It was a greasy spoon off the interstate, smelling of fried bacon and old coffee. I chose a corner booth facing the door. I wanted to observe him before he saw me. Exactly at 3 o'clock, the door jingled. Matthew walked in. My brother always looked like he had just stepped out of a catalog. Custom suits, expensive watches, perfect hair. Today he looked like a ghost. His shoulders were slumped. His expensive wool coat looked rumpled, and he had dark, heavy bags under his eyes. He spotted me, walked over slowly, and slid into the vinyl booth across from me. He didn't take off his coat. He just stared at his hands resting on the sticky table. "Thanks for coming, Josh," he said softly. I didn't offer a polite smile. I flagged down the waitress, ordered 2 black coffees, and waited until she walked away. "You have 30 minutes, Matthew. Start talking." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "I had a massive screaming match with Mom yesterday. After you kicked us out of your house, things at home went nuclear. Uncle Joseph's lawyer is trying to throw Mom under the bus to reduce his own sentence. They are turning on each other. It's disgusting." I took a slow sip of my ice water. "There is no honor among thieves, Matt. What does this have to do with me?" Matthew looked up, and for the first time in my 28 years of existence, I saw genuine tears welling up in my older brother's eyes. "I am so sorry, Josh," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I am so incredibly sorry." I raised an eyebrow. "Sorry for what? You didn't forge the invoices. You didn't steal the charity money." "No," he said, shaking his head. "I am sorry because I was completely, intentionally blind. I spent my whole life living in a golden bubble they built for me, and I never once looked down to see that you were the one holding the bubble up." The waitress dropped off our mugs. The thick ceramic clinked loudly against the table. Matthew wrapped his hands around his mug, desperate for the warmth. "When Dad drained the massive college fund to send me to that expensive out-of-state university, I never once asked how you were going to pay for your school," Matthew continued, his tears finally spilling over. "When I got my big promotion last year and bragged at dinner about my massive new salary, I never once noticed that you were driving a 10-year-old car and working 80-hour weeks for the family charity for absolutely free. I just assumed you liked doing it. I assumed you were fine." He wiped his face aggressively with a paper napkin. "I confronted Mom yesterday. I asked her why she treated you like the hired help while treating me like royalty. Do you know what she said to me?" I leaned forward, my jaw tight. "Enlighten me." "She said you were capable. She said you didn't need the coddling." Matthew let out a bitter, ugly laugh. "But then she slipped up, Josh. She admitted she intentionally kept you busy. She intentionally isolated you so you wouldn't ask me for a loan or try to ride my coattails. She starved you of affection so you would keep working for her approval. She didn't raise you, Josh. She managed you, and she used me as the bait." A cold, heavy knot in my stomach finally unspooled. Hearing it out loud, validated by the golden child himself, was a surreal, out-of-body experience. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt a profound sense of pity for the woman who birthed us. "I thought her favoritism just meant I was deeply loved," Matthew whispered. "I didn't realize my entire comfort, my whole life, was built on your exclusion. I didn't know." I looked at my older brother. For nearly 3 decades, I had deeply resented him. But looking at him right now, broken, humiliated, and stripped of his ego, I saw another victim of Margaret's manipulation. He was pampered, yes, but he was also used as a prop. A shiny trophy to show off to the country club, designed to make the family look perfect. Ignorance is a luxury, Matthew, I said evenly, keeping my voice steady. You benefited from a highly corrupt system. You enjoyed the view from the top while I was in the basement. But you are sitting here now owning it. You are looking at the ugly truth instead of running from it. That counts for something. He looked at me with a desperate kind of hope. Are you ever going to talk to them again? No, I answered immediately. Uncle Joseph's financial ruin and his divorce are his own problems. Mom and Dad losing their social standing and dealing with the fallout of their fake charity is their own problem. I am done setting myself on fire to keep them warm. What about me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked out the diner window at the gray sky. Cars were rushing past on the highway, people moving on with their lives. I don't hate you, Matt, I said honestly. But we don't really have a relationship. We share DNA, but we don't actually know each other. I am willing to try and build something new, slowly. But the minute you try to act as a peacekeeper for them, or try to drag me back into their drama, I am blocking your number 2. Matthew nodded vigorously, relief flooding his face. Deal. Absolutely. No talking about them. Just us. We sat there for the rest of the hour drinking awful diner coffee. We talked about sports. We talked about my architectural designs. We talked about his job. It was stilted. It was a little awkward. But it was the most honest, authentic conversation we had ever had in our entire lives. It was the beginning of a real brotherhood, built on truth instead of family politics. By the time Christmas finally arrived, my life was completely unrecognizable. And I mean that in the absolute best, most liberating way possible. I spent Christmas Eve in my townhouse. The dining table wasn't set with fine china, and there were no towering centerpieces. We ate off mismatched plates. Gabriel came over with his wife, bringing 2 massive trays of homemade baked ziti. My friend Sarah from the design firm brought 3 bottles of cheap wine. We played board games on the floor, laughing so hard my ribs actually ached. There was no tension in the room. There were no hidden agendas. No one was keeping score of who bought the most expensive gift. Nobody was handing out velvet boxes to favorites and ignoring the rest. It was just pure, uncomplicated, genuine joy. I looked around at the people sitting in my living room and realized that family isn't determined by blood. Family is determined by respect. The professional vindication I had been working for my whole life came a week later, right after the new year. I received an unexpected phone call from Christopher, the former chairman of the charity board. He asked me to meet him at a high-end architectural firm in the center of the city. When I arrived, he led me into a massive corner office and introduced me to Nathan, the CEO of a major commercial real estate development company. Nathan also happened to be one of the heaviest hitters on the charity board. Joshua, Nathan said, standing up and shaking my hand with a firm, solid grip. Christopher showed me the encrypted file you sent him before the gala collapsed. I went through the documents. I saw your original 3D lighting schematics for the vaulted ceilings. I stood tall, keeping my posture straight. Yes, sir. Joseph Mercer tried to pass those designs off as his own, Nathan continued, his eyes locked on mine. He pitched them to my company to secure a grant. But any idiot with half a brain could see the technical brilliance belonged to a real, trained engineer, not a logistics manager. The board was furious about the financial embezzlement, Joshua. But as a businessman, I was absolutely furious about the stolen talent. Nathan walked around his mahogany desk and leaned against it. I value integrity. You walked away from your own family's project, you walked away from the social pressure, all to protect your name and the truth. That takes serious guts. And your designs are flawless. He slid a thick, heavy manila folder across the polished wood of his desk. I am breaking ground on a restored historical opera house in the Arts District next month, Nathan said. It is a multi-million-dollar preservation project. The lighting architecture is the most crucial part of the entire build. I want you as the lead lighting architect. You will have full creative control, your own team, and your name on the marquee. The contract is yours if you want it. I opened the folder. My eyes scanned the pages. The numbers on the contract were staggering. It was more than my entire previous year's salary combined. It was the kind of flagship project that makes an entire career. It was the promotion I had always deserved but never received because I was too busy building someone else's empire. I didn't have to think about it. I picked up the pen on his desk and signed the paperwork right there in his office. When I walked out of that building, the freezing January wind hit my face, but I felt completely invincible. The people who had tried to bury me, the family that had tried to keep me small and useful, had inadvertently handed me the shovel to build my own empire. Months passed. The snow melted, the trees budded, and spring finally arrived in the city. I was deeply immersed in the Opera House project, working long hours, but this time I was working for myself. I was building my own legacy. One sunny afternoon in late April, I walked out to my mailbox and found a thick, cream-colored envelope sitting inside. I recognized the elegant, looping handwriting immediately. It was from my mother. I took it inside, tossed my keys on the kitchen counter, and stared at the envelope for a long time. 6 months ago, my heart would have been pounding out of my chest. I would have ripped it open, desperate to read whatever scraps of validation or love she might have finally thrown my way. Now, my heart rate didn't even spike. My hands didn't shake. I opened it calmly with a letter opener. It was a 4-page handwritten letter. There were no demands in it. There were no guilt trips. There were no manipulative attempts to make me feel sorry for her. It was a complete, unconditional surrender. She wrote about how quiet the house was now that the chaos had settled. She wrote about the agonizing shame of the public fallout, how the local community had completely turned their backs on her. She mentioned that her own mother, my grandmother, had formally amended her will and stripped my mother of her entire inheritance because she refused to have her legacy associated with a public charity scandal. But the most shocking part of the letter was the middle. "I loved the applause, Joshua," she wrote, the ink slightly smudged on the paper. "I loved the applause of those galas more than I loved being an honest mother. I loved the image of our family more than the reality of it. I used you because it was easy. I used you because you never fought back, and because you were so desperate for my love, I knew you would do whatever I asked. I destroyed my relationship with my own son for the sake of a country club membership." She didn't ask for forgiveness. She ended the letter by saying she understood if I never trusted her again, but she just wanted me to know that she was finally seeing the ugly truth in the mirror. I read the letter twice. I sat at my kitchen island, the same place I had sat the morning after Thanksgiving when I decided to burn it all down. I didn't feel a sudden rush of anger. I didn't feel a miraculous rush of forgiveness, either. I just felt a quiet, absolute, heavy closure. It was the apology I had waited 28 years for. It was the validation I had craved my entire life. But arriving after the battle was already over, after the castle had already burned down, it held absolutely no power over me. I folded the letter neatly, walked into my home office, placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk, and shut it. I didn't write back. I didn't call her. Some doors, once closed, are meant to stay closed forever. Boundaries are not meant to be temporary punishments. They are meant to be permanent protection. My mother lost her flawless image and her inheritance. My father lost the comfortable illusion of his own innocence. Uncle Joseph lost his reputation, his marriage, and his wealth. And me? I lost something too. I lost the desperate, pathetic childhood hope that if I just worked hard enough, if I just kept my mouth shut and fixed everyone's problems, I could earn love from people who were entirely committed to misunderstanding me. And that loss, strangely enough, was the key that gave me my entire life back. Looking back at everything that happened, from that humiliating Thanksgiving dinner to the explosive confrontation in my hallway, there is a profound, non-negotiable lesson I want to share with all of you today. Being the dependable one in a broken, Toxic family can feel like a noble sacrifice. You tell yourself you are keeping the peace. You tell yourself you are being the bigger person by absorbing the damage. But listen to me carefully. If your love, your presence, and your talent are only welcomed when they come with free labor, financial favors, or unquestioning obedience, you are not being cherished. You are being managed. True love does not hand you a bill for basic respect. True family does not panic and attack you when you set a healthy boundary. They respect it. The moment I stopped confusing access with affection, my entire world changed. I realized that my worth was never tied to how useful I could be to manipulative people. Personal growth and self-respect often require you to be the villain in someone else's false narrative, and you have to be perfectly okay with that. Walking away from abusers, even if they share your DNA, is not an act of revenge. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation. You owe your loyalty to the people who protect your peace, not the people who destroy it. What is your perspective on this? Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic environment or toxic family members to save your own sanity? How did you find the courage to finally lock the door? I would love to read your stories and hear your thoughts down below in the comments. Or, if this story resonated with you and you agree with the lessons we talked about today, simply drop the word good in the comments so I know we are on the same page and that these lessons matter to you. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your incredible support, and always remember to protect your peace.